Have you ever finished a self-help book and close it feeling completely fired up? You're nodding along the whole way. Yeah, that's so true. Collecting all these great little nuggets of wisdom, feeling like your whole life is about to change. And then a few months later, you look around and pretty much everything's the same. Nothing's really shifted. I don't think that's because we're lazy. I think it's because most of what we read stops at the level of knowing. It never quite turns into some small thing we actually carry into the next day. So today, I want to share a book that was never actually meant to be published. The man who wrote it had zero interest in lecturing anyone. He was just writing letters, deeply personal letters from a father to his son. That man was J.D.Rockefeller, who's often called one of the richest people in history. And maybe it's because he wasn't trying to teach the world anything that the letters feel so honest and so close. Those 38 letters were eventually collected into a book. And the thing I love is that they're not really about money. They're about how we think. Those quiet mental habits where, without realizing it, we end up being the ones standing in our own way. I'm not going to walk through all 38 letters. I picked out 3 that feel the most relevant to anyone who's trying to grow. For each one, I'll tell you the idea behind it, plus one small thing you can take from it. So if it resonates, you can try it in your own life, in your own way. Honestly, I'm learning these right alongside you. The first letter is about something I think almost all of us have felt. That pull to wait for the right moment. We get an idea in our head. Pick up a new skill, start a little project, try a different path. And then this very reasonable voice pipes up. Let me learn a bit more first. Let me get settled first. I'll do it once the timing's right. It sounds so mature, but a lot of the time, that right time just keeps drifting further off. And what we're really waiting for is a feeling of total certainty. Something that almost never comes. What's interesting is that Rockefeller talks about luck too, but he sees it pretty differently. He doesn't deny that luck is real. He actually said that people can't really live without luck, the same way they can't live without money. He fully admits it exists. But then he adds a twist I find brilliant. He didn't sit around waiting for luck from the heavens. He counted on what he called luck you've prepared for. To him, luck isn't quite something that falls out of the sky. It's more like something you can quietly clear a space for ahead of time. A good plan, in his view, can set the stage for luck to show up. He also never says you have to be perfect before you begin. His message is more like, build a basic foundation out of whatever you've already got, and then go ahead and try. Because luck tends to find people who are already moving, rather than people standing still, waiting. And there's an easy thing to take from that. Instead of asking, am I ready yet? Sometimes a gentler question helps more. What's the smallest version of this that I could actually do this week? A big idea, sliced down to one tiny step, just naturally feels less scary. In each of those small steps, to borrow Rockefeller's way of seeing it, is like a little space you've cleared in advance, so that if luck happens to pass by, it's got somewhere to land. The second letter touches something our generation runs into more than ever. That feeling you get the moment you open your phone. Scroll through social media for a minute, and it's easy to spot people our own age who seem to be miles ahead. They've got the house, they've traveled everywhere, they've pulled off big things. And almost automatically, a comparison forms in your head, along with this sense that maybe they just started from a better place. It's a very human feeling. I think all of us have had a little of it. What makes this one land is that Rockefeller can speak to it with real weight, because he wasn't born into wealth. He grew up in a family that didn't have much, and his first job was just a clerk on a modest salary. And yet, in his letter to his son, he shares a perspective that's worth pausing on. To him, a humble start isn't necessarily a disadvantage. Sometimes it's a kind of hidden asset, because it forces you to figure things out yourself, to learn fast, to want it in a way that having everything handed to you often doesn't. He saw your starting point as the opening line of a story, not its ending. Where the story goes from there comes down to the choices you make later on. And tucked inside that is something kind of freeing. Comparing your starting line to the distance someone else has already covered is a bit of an unfair comparison in the first place, because the two things aren't really measured on the same scale, which opens up a small, gentle shift in the question we ask. Every time that, if only I had what they had, feeling shows up, and it'll keep showing up. That's completely normal. Instead of stopping there, you can try asking, with what I've actually got in my hands, what's the next small step I can take? It doesn't erase the comparison, but it quietly turns your gaze from someone else's starting line back to the road right under your own feet. And that, more often than not, is the only place you can actually move from. Because when it comes down to it, where you start is one of the few things you don't get to choose over again. And since you can't change it, all the comparing and complaining in the world just leaves you with a sour feeling, while the situation itself stays exactly the same. The part that's genuinely in your hands is a different part. Given the cards life has dealt you, how are you going to play them to get as far as you possibly can? Some people get dealt a great hand and play it badly. Others get a mediocre hand and somehow find a way to win. The difference usually isn't in the cards. It's in how they're played. And that, lucky for us, is exactly the part we get to decide. The third letter is about something I think we all carry a bit of. That hesitation in the face of getting it wrong. There are things we put off, not because they're hard, but because we're scared the result won't go our way. We hold off on sending in an application for fear of rejection. Hold off on putting something out there because it's not perfect yet. We prepare, and then we prepare some more. And sometimes, all that drawn-out preparing quietly becomes its own form of procrastination. Part of it, I think, is that we sometimes slip into putting an equal sign between failing once and being a failure. Rockefeller pretty much flips that on its head. In his letters, he doesn't treat failure as something to hide. He treats it more like tuition. The price you pay to learn something you simply couldn't have learned without stepping out and trying. He told his sons something worth remembering too. A person who's never failed often isn't more talented. They may just never have tried anything big enough. But the key to how he saw it isn't failure's no big deal. It's something more subtle than that. A failure only really becomes a loss when you walk away from it carrying no lesson at all. As long as each time you stumble, you get back up with something you've learned, it's more of a stepping stone than a dead end. If you sit with that idea a little longer, you start to see that every failure is actually pointing at where you're still falling short of what you want. Sometimes what's missing is ability, and that's a signal to go learn more, to sharpen up. Sometimes what's missing is timing, or the right opening, and next time becomes the moment to watch more closely and grab it when it comes. Every fall is one more chance to spot a missing piece, and then quietly fill it in. And little by little, the gap between you and what you're after gets shorter. And if you look at the most capable, most successful people out there, almost none of them were flawless from the start. Behind them is usually a whole string of failures. The only difference is that after each one, they got a little better, so the next attempt beat the last. Maybe it's that next time better than last time, repeated over and over, that actually builds success. more than any one big stroke of luck. And from that spirit comes a pretty good thing to try: redefining success a little before you dive into something that scares you a bit. Instead of treating success only as getting accepted, getting praised, getting the outcome you wanted, you can try setting the finish line somewhere closer and more within reach. I dared to try, and I took one thing away from it. When the finish line sits there, then no matter how it turns out, you can hardly walk away empty-handed. And that's pretty close to how Rockefeller looked at his whole life. If you look closely, you might notice these 3 letters are really circling the same thing: waiting for luck, second-guessing your starting point, dreading failure. All 3, in their own way, are just different versions of the same familiar whisper: start later. And if you had to wrap the spirit running through all of Rockefeller's letters into a single idea, it'd probably be this: life doesn't wait for you to be perfectly prepared. It just asks that you dare to begin, and that you're willing to learn from what you actually do. If you feel comfortable, I'd love to read what you have to share down in the comments. Sometimes one person's story turns out to be exactly what helps someone else who's quietly reading along. If this video gave you even one small thing to take away, that alone makes me happy. I'm slowly reading and sharing more books like this one, so if you'd like to come along for the ride, I'd really appreciate it. Thanks for listening all the way through, and I'll see you in the next one.